a developer's approach to standing up a conversational AI practice. If you're new to this series, or maybe you forgot my name is Sam Burns. I'm on the marketing team over at Voiceflow. I run this series, and I'm very excited to welcome Victor from Cisco. Victor, thank you so much for being here. So excited to have your knowledge and expertise in this live session.
Happy to be here.
So why don't I toss it over to you for a little bit of kind of what we're going to cover today, and then maybe a little bit of background if that works.
Great. Well, yeah, so I guess the kind of big idea of this session is we'll just kind of go over some lessons learned the hard way, and from an engineering point of view, what it takes to kind of support your conversation design and content experts, and ways you can kind of unleash these kind of creative professionals to do their thing. And if you're on kind of more technical engineering side, ways that you can contribute very meaningfully to these conversation design initiatives.
And I know you won't pump your own tires, so I'm going to do it for you. I think if anyone's worked with Victor or knows of Victor, I think, or knows of any teams, I think the reason we're having this session is because not many developers on conversational AI teams have that like all-in championing type of support for the design side, and vice versa, right? So I think, Victor is he excels at that so much at the Cisco team. So that's why I think we're so excited to have you here for not only your thought leadership in these first slides, but then also a pretty unique demo that you're building in Voiceflow with designers, which we'll come to see is unique, right? To build in at the beginning of a workflow like that. Awesome. So let me toss it over to you for a bit of background and kind of give people the 101 of Victor, your career, and kind of what you're doing at Cisco.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name is Victor Algaze. I'm a software engineer in the Cisco CX customer experience organization. I've been very fortunate, and this is actually not a particularly unique experience at Cisco. I've been able to jump all around the Cisco portfolio. I've done a lot of incubation work with user interfaces, IoT, work a little with collaboration devices. But I had a mentor tell me that a good superpower would be to get closer to the customers and build products for it. And my old team actually, that I started with at Cisco, moved into the new cool kids on the block at Cisco, the customer experience organization. I've been there for about less than 3 years. And the big initiative that I've been involved with at the CX organization is an application called the CX Cloud, which has been described as kind of like the front door for Cisco to help folks manage, like all their network infrastructure, and just really try to maximize the return on their investment in, this whole portfolio of services and products that Cisco has available. I was kind of taken, when I joined the CX group, I was taken into the back room by a colleague. This is literally true. And they said, we need chat now, like figure it out. And so just really like from the jump, it was kind of like drinking from a fire hose and get up to speed on like, or the technical details of building a chat agent, to actually build a chat widget UI, get it, deeply, take a lot of, TLC to make it inside the CX Cloud application, make it like part of the application, not some foreign widget that's just tacked on there, but like deeply integrated as part of the experience. It's currently, I can't speak to a lot of the details of how it works yet today, but it's in customer trials, and we just did a couple of demos at our conference in Vegas a few weeks ago. So it's been very exciting on the conversation front.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that when we talked earlier this month, one of the funnier things you said was like, I never thought about it, but like, hey, I'm a chat guy, and like it is really, you start to own a channel, you start to own a part of the workflow, and I love it, right? Because you didn't start there, and now you're all the way into it.
Yeah, if you talk to any of my friends, this is like literally all I've been thinking and talking about for the past like couple of years. So I've inflicted chat on many different people. Just to kind of set the table for, again, so we have, CX Cloud and this whole notion of trying to like maximize the users, like return on investment on their, like all their technology and networking components. The thing you should know about, what's happening at Cisco is there's a massive movement from selling, hardware, routers and switches to a whole huge portfolio of like software and services, across, stuff like how networks are orchestrated, managed, secured. So there's a lot going on at Cisco, and because of like the volume and the variety of products, delivering like high quality support for, our customers who are from every industry you could possibly imagine is a massive challenge. And the automation piece of that from Conversations is what made this a very high priority. Why I've drank so deeply of conversation stuff lately. But anyway, that's the 101 on me and what I've been up to at Cisco.
Awesome. So I think this section, I'm maybe next to the demo, I'm most excited about, because I think this is a question that not only have I asked you, but everyone's asking one another right now, right? Of like, when it comes to good conversational AI, what makes it possible, right? And we'll talk a little bit about the workflow, but would love kind of for you to walk everyone through really, what do you think makes good conversational AI when you're approaching it and working on it with your team today?
Yeah, for our specific purpose is we kind of have it's almost like the Federal Reserve. I had to have like two simultaneous goals at once. We want to, the first overriding priority goal is we want a fabulous experience for our customers, a good customer experience. So as they work their way through the portfolio, they're able to resolve any issues they have faster, or if they need to get information, even better, you can like predictively like anticipate these problems and get them solved so they're not even an issue to deal with. Another thing to keep in mind is Cisco has a pretty incredible support group. These are folks like if a bank's branch goes offline, these are like the Ghostbusters. You call these people, they'll help you. And especially during COVID, when there was like massive network load because everybody's working from home and doing high quality streaming, these folks are as already busy. We're busier than ever. So anything we could do to help reduce their case burden on things that could be automated was, super high value. And Sam and I kind of were talking about this notion of like double wins for a customer. This is like a no-brainer. They can quickly resolve their issues. They can express in whatever level of detail or charming chat experience they want to get their issues resolved. Interact with privileged APIs and like just get stuff done. And then on the flip side, like we talk about for the folks on the back end doing support, if we can, either reduce their case burden, or if they do need to open a case, it's a super well specified case. They have all the customer details and context. We'll talk about context in a moment. That's a big one. So we're able to have both groups benefit, but obviously the number one priority is to make sure that like this is like a fabulous experience for our customers. But there's other like knock-on benefits that across the organization for having like a good AI, a conversational AI practice.
Yeah, and that double win turns into quadruple and 10 and 20 win for those other functions. But it starts right with the customer and then the support teams that you're supporting, right? You mentioned context. Why don't you dive into like where context is playing a big part in good conversational AI for you?
Yeah, so specifically for like this CX Cloud example, since it's like integrated, it's like part of the UI. It's not like some little like widget tacked on there. We know a little bit of what the user's up to in the user interface. Oh, they clicked on this asset. Odds are they probably will have a problem with that asset when they launch the chat experience. There's other stuff we know about them too, because like, CX Cloud, I don't think anyone on this call will ever probably use it. It's for a very specific group of highly technical users. And the idea is when they go into this service, like they're authenticated. So we know stuff about like, where are they in the customer life cycle? Have they recently bought a new product? Like there's so many different signals that we can use, and anything we can do to kind of feed that into our conversation engine ahead of time, can help our customers like really quickly resolve their issues. And like a critical component of this has to have excellent content. So finding ways where we can add like really high value functionality that has like really well written content and need to be supported in multiple languages, and like it's easy to follow and kind of you're able to traverse through the portfolio. That's like a big win for everybody. Two examples recently of, I probably have used every chat bot on the internet at this point, but two examples, we were talking about this the other day of that stand out for me. I have, as you can imagine, like a lot of different, extracurricular, a lot of different bots and stuff on different platforms. My Google Cloud platform, the credit card I used, I lost that credit card. And all of a sudden I got a very serious email that says, your payments expired. We're going to shut down all your infrastructure, update your payment information. And I was kind of dreading updating this payment information because I don't think I'm hurting anyone's feelings here, but going through like the admin UI of like a lot of cloud services is a little complicated. What I was able to do is I talked to their agent, was able to update my payment credentials. It took me a little tour through the UI of how to do it. It also was able to, I had an extra question of like, well, what about past payments that failed? I got an answer to that. And I just remember going through this whole experience being like, that was really cool that saved me all this time. That was like the gold standard to me. And I'd recommend anyone just test out on Apple. If you have an iPhone, you can open the Apple store. Before you talk to an agent, they'll take you through like problem discovery processes. And, they're able to, based on like information about you, because they know who you are, they can infer like, oh, this is a recent purchase. You have an issue with that? And anytime I've had this, I've had like an issue to deal with Apple, like I've been really impressed by their agent's ability to like anticipate my problems, like almost like magic. And so that's kind of the gold standard for me. So if you're able to go in with the problem, not have to clicky clack through an interface, but can kind of conversationally get done what you can express an intention of what you want to get done and actually get it done. That's the goal for me. And I think that's, global across any, productive or useful chat agent.
One thing that I keep hearing you say too is like this clear process and path doesn't need to just be a simple process and path, right? Like your design and development and the experience needs to allow users to move through in the way that they want to, right? If that's 1, 2, 3, 4 done, or if it's let's surprise and delight forever and ever and then done, like however they want to move through that, it's supposed to be ready for and flexible for that user, right? And I think that's something that you keep championing, which which we'll touch on later, that navigational versus conversational approach. It doesn't need to just be navigational into production. It can be conversational while still supporting a very rote step-by-step process.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing, I think the two examples you just shared, you were delighted by those in the moment because you're in this space, right? You're talking the talk, you're walking the walk. And I think one thing that we went deeper on is talking about, well, everyone notices when a bot and experience is bad. But I think we started to define this in a little bit text heavy slide, but this is kind of like this next one here is really this guide that we want people to be able to take over. Walk us through the funny C's here of crapbot, chatbot, and then conversational AI.
Yeah, so that's why we stumbled on the 3C. So I think crapbot, I think all of us have a good sense of what this is. You have to deal with some company, you have some issue, and you say, oh, wonderful, they have a chatbot. You click, it's usually like a big circle in the corner, something pops out, and you're like, all right, let's, it's 2022, let's get to this and automate things. And you find out it doesn't really know what you want. There may not be any like natural language processing. You might be, basically filling out a quiz. If you need help from a person, they probably won't be sophisticated enough to, enter a chat session with you. They might be able to give you like a phone number to call. Like, I think I think the essential thing of like crapbots I've seen out in the world are things that don't solve your problems and are just like unpleasant to use. Like, and the end result are like frustrated users. And they probably won't be coming back if they've gotten burned by these kinds of experiences. I think the mid ground is, we'll call them chatbots. These are pretty simple, like input outputs, like, hey, I have a case ID, what's the status on this? It'll call an API on your behalf, way better than a crackbot, right? It can solve some manner of user problems as long as they're really well specified, for this, support kind of situation. Maybe they can put you in a queue. At best, we'll put you in a queue to talk, to go like have a one-on-one session with the person, which of course in the era of like everybody working at home and there's like all this huge surge of like customer support requests, just slotting more people in line doesn't really solve the problem for that customer. That middle ground is useful.
I always think of this middle ground as just like building a moat around customer support, right?
Yeah.
It's not pleasant. Everyone's just sitting in the moat. They can't really cross. They're waiting on the bridge to come down, and they're just waiting, right? There's no pleasant, there's no answers, there's no solution in the moat. That you're just building a moat.
Yeah, I'm glad you even said that. Like, one way to reduce the case burden on your support teams is make your support teams really hard to contact. That's a bad idea. That's not what you should do. But bad bots do that, right? They say, look at these metrics. Like, yeah, because people couldn't get in touch with the people they needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you get to the promised land of conversational AI, you can say we solve all sorts of problems. For that customer support situation, you can do kind of what the CX gang's been up to, is maybe we can use a little bit of intelligence to figure out who this customer is. What, has this problem been solved in the past? Are there self-help resources, or is there some kind of some kind of automated procedure that should be kicked off that might be able to, maybe not resolve the problem, but can provide extra details of the problem. So if you do need to talk to a customer support person, there's not a wall blocking you. If the agent fails to deflect opening a case, you'll at least have a really well specified case. So if you do need to talk to a person, those conversations between people aren't about playing ping pong and exchanging data information. That's table stakes. That should already be there. But you're able to, right off the jump, kind of get down to business. So I think all of us have had, bad chat experiences, mediocre ones you probably don't remember. And unless you think about this every day, like I do, you may not, when it goes well, you're like, oh, I saw my problem. Bye. That's it. You don't even need to think about it so much.
Well, and I think too, it's again, it's hard. I think someone looking at your team from the outside, or how you bring to your team, you need developers and engineers thinking like this and thinking about a conversational experience, not just going to production, right? Like, you're thinking about this alongside a user tester, alongside research, right? And I think that's that unified approach that we're going to get into here a bit with the workflow, but just a call out that not many engineers and developers are thinking about it in this way. And I think that's the change in maturity we're seeing with some high performing teams.
Yeah, very much so. I'm in a very luxurious situation in the sense that I have a dedicated research team. We have amazing content experts, and it's great when you have a lot of resource, a lot of time to do these things. But if you're on a compressed timeline, you can still use good lessons learned the hard way, and have good tooling to approximate having these big teams and kind of all these extra luxurious stuff. But I think the goal always is to get to this third tier of a true conversational AI. You can express your intention and kind of figure out, and the agent's able to kind of figure out what you meant, and what your intention is.
Walk us through this quote. I think this is a pretty.
So, if anyone hasn't heard of Ken before, he was involved with inventing a bunch of stuff on the iPhone, including the autocorrect. He's been on a tear on Twitter lately, describing how, in the early days, because this is a very different screen, right, for interaction, even typing. And in this thread, he was talking about when you in the first version, when you would tap an item on the keyboard, if you were there's a little bit of adjustment where, because depending on the curvature of your finger, you might think you're tapping one place when in fact, you might perceive you're tapping one place, but your fingers is in fact tapping another place. So if you put any finger on the screen, you're going to tap something. And that was a rule they came up with. Because what they found is, and I really like this quote, because not as a Zen koan to say this is going to solve all your conversational design issues, but give people what they meant rather than what they did. Maybe they didn't give your agent exactly the perfectly specified problem solution. You didn't get all the all the data up front. Find ways to reprompt them and get that information. And I think this little quote's a good little bumper sticker that I think influences. Yeah. It definitely influences a lot of my thinking on how a good agent should in fact work.
Awesome. Well, before we hop into the demo, let's talk through. You keep mentioning lessons learned the hard way, and I think one thing that we definitely talked about was your original workflow that you've experienced, kind of like early maturity in conversational AI versus what you're doing now. So why don't we kind of go through like past and current workflows and maybe walk us through kind of like how, especially from a developer perspective, engineer perspective, how you were working with designers on kind of a tooling and a challenges perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So like in our first kind of versions of this, and good tip for any engineers listening is get to a real demo as quickly as possible. No more scripts or like get something and write, get something up and running, and then put real people in front of it, and you can get a sense if it's working or not. That was the number one priority. The number one priority was not to have a perfectly well thought out workflow that makes our conversation designers happy. It was just like, let's get something up and running as quickly as we can and get in front of people and get feedback on it. But over time, like these processes, like as this thing gets bigger and bigger, these processes like start to hit their breaking point. When you have so much content, when you have like zillions of devices and have different flows, this can work, but it'll break down. If you enshrine, for instance, like content, and this is a famous example, like if you enshrine content in inside of like the source code or in some kind of configuration place, the conversation designers, they might have to wait until the next release, right? Because we'll bucket up a bunch of changes and say, okay, it's been 2 weeks, flush it, deploy it. But if you just want like a little edit, you're gonna have to wait, and that's not super great. If you want to like bolt on new functionality or a new flow, you have to think about, okay, how would I get this with the existing processes and people we have? How would I get this new functionality, this new content in there? So you're thinking a little bit like more about your internal processes. You're more like your internal processes rather than, how do we get like really good outcomes from this? How do you make this a good like conversation, experience for people?
Yeah.
And it's just like figuring out this conversation design stuff is very much a team sport. You have, conversation designers, you have engineers building, you probably have a, product manager type people quarterbacking, you'll have you have researchers and designers, how the chat widget looks, what kind of like cards or a carousel, like little suggestion chips on the bottom, what should those do? If you need to upload a file, right? I remember we had a thing, you upload a file. How does that look in the UI? What happens when the agent deals with it? All those little considerations, those need to be team decisions. But there's so much, as you can see from a diagram like this, there's so much going on. It's tough to add new features as you kind of go along this process, basically.
Yeah, I liked you described it as, missing the window, but like missing the train too, right? Of like, if you want something in production, there was no process in order to, communicate that. And there was no standard language to communicate that, right? And you spent, I know you mentioned too, like you spent a lot of times editing, right? Or like small nitpicky changes versus like creative out of the box. What if?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. We talked about those double wins.
Yeah.
For like, moving content between having an authorship tool can help conversation designers. You can say, you don't need to deal with those mean old engineers and have to go, have to do all this waiting. So like, okay, great, I'm sold. Then you can talk to the engineering groups and you can say, hey, instead of having to deal with these little nitpicky things from these super picky conversation designers, you can just make all that work evaporate and just focus on the integration. And you can focus on the highest and best use of your very limited attention and engineering time on stuff that actually will make this experience better, right? So it's like to have like, tooling and a pipeline or processes in place, like helps everybody fire on all cylinders. It can get rid of like the not fun part of what in my experience has been it can be a very fun process.
One of the first people we talked to in this series was Peter from Woolies X. He's a conversation designer. And I know he kind of from the opposite side was talking about how he would design like what if, potential, outside the box ideas. And then we'd say like, well, how much of that will actually make it to production? He's like, oh, well, I need to delete 90% of that. Right. Like he designed the because he had originally he did not know like what's possible, what API calls exist, what can devs actually run with. Right. So just to kind of reinforce what you're saying from both sides, there is that
Yeah.
nitpicky rework that just limits everyone and makes it unpleasant, as you say.
Yeah, if you find that like your process or lack thereof sometimes is like inhibiting creativity, and someone has a good idea and it's taking longer than it should, or there's like some weird process challenge, it's time to start to it's kind of, it's like that expression, like, working like for business versus working on the business. This is almost like a super internal thing. I think folks, me personally, I'm always super reluctant to work on a lot of internal things because like I want to release features and show them to customers. But investing in this process and being really deliberate about it can, not just pay dividends in like, sanity preservation, but can increase feature velocity. You can do cooler stuff if you have better, processes in place.
Yeah, speaking of the better processes, before we show the cooler stuff, what are some of the new, you touched on a little bit, I think, with Team Smart,
Yeah.
of the process that's like still being built and refined as every team is, but like what's really working for you today?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, like we said, we're still very much on our journey. We're all learning, but I think the big one is finding ways to kind of separate the content writing from like from like the engineering details, and to let people who are not subject matter experts in either domain be able to use stuff from it. So the engineers who are like, oh, we need a special card that'll look like this, they can grab that from the designers, put that into the widget, and then there's the backend team has like the correct specification, so we know how to display that card at the right times and all that stuff. Once all those pieces are moving and grooving, you can all of a sudden make really cool experiences. And we've been able to bang out a lot of neat stuff quickly by having like better workflows.
Yeah, to this quote, right? Exactly, this quote.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
it's not just you, it's not just devs, it's not just engineers, it's designers across the board too, right? Like the options are more endless. And I think on that note, let's hop into the demo and kind of show people how you're using Voiceflow, but then also how you are, maybe we can set the stage first here. But why don't you give us kind of the brief, for example, of what you're thinking about building, and then I'll kind of play the role of designer and we'll kind of talk through that before and after a bit.
Perfect. So what we'll show today is a treat shop that sells ice cream, and ice cream picked very deliberately because I think it, especially for engineers who are like first coming into like supporting a conversation design team, ice cream I think kind of hits most of the key concepts. So you say like, I want a large strawberry ice cream. Well, their intention there would be they want ice cream. Okay, that's an intent, order ice cream. And they can say, what flavor? Strawberry. What size? Large. Oh, we're extracting parameters. If you're involved in the natural language part of that, you might be really excited about, like how you actually do that and the training of it. If you're on another side of the engineering, you're just like, I'm going to send this to the system and it's going to spit me back. I'm going to send natural language in, it'll spit me back, matched intent and extracted parameters. Then I can take those and send them to an API. When you start speaking in that kind of language to engineers, they start thinking of like, ooh, I can call other services with this information. Then the wheels start spinning, and then they start talking to designers, and then things kind of go off the rails in a good way from there. And you can mash up some pretty compelling experiences. I think for today, we'll start with like the simple text example, and then we'll just kind of add on to it and show how, with good coordination from the engineering side, the conversation designers can then be unleashed to kind of run wild with their work.
Absolutely. And before I pass the screen over to you, let's, like, for the sake of this demo and example and kind of like showing, like assuming we're building in Voiceflow regardless, right? But like maybe there's this, in the first example, there's no communication between dev and design, right? And it's kind of like your old process. I mean, I think the thing is here, like for the use case you just mentioned, yes, we know the entities and variables we need to hit and fulfill, but like as a designer, if I said, hey, I want to make this like location specific, right? Or I want this to be like location specific, and I hadn't talked to you, I might go into Voiceflow and have to try to manually or rotely build that or add 700 words of markup. And all of a sudden you're going to come in and be like, I can't do anything with this. I need to start scratch. I'm not going to add location because timeline, we need to launch this in a week. And all of a sudden it's a little bit more navigational. So that's just the kind of the context to what you just said on like the if we're in the past, in the older workflow, right?
No, for sure. And like, you're working on a conversation design project, talk to your team, have lots of conversation about conversation and your process.
Absolutely.
So, okay. Here is kind of set the table here. One moment, let me share my screen.
Got it.
Good. So here's our ice cream shop. We start here, jumps in, we listen for an intent, what kind of ice cream they want. And then depending on their answers, we'll take specific action. For us, success here will be, we didn't do like an Uber Eats integration, but like if you had a picture return in our WebEx chat agent with the picture of an ice cream cone, that means you've got an ice cream. That's success for us. These menu items here is stuff like if a designer wants to add another flavor, they can go ahead and do that in Voiceflow, and then without any, intervention, engineering intervention, they can just add content wherever they want. So that's like a very powerful model there. And for folks who haven't really touched this stuff before, like the behind the scenes of this is, like we said, we have a parameter flavor, right? We'll say for now these flavors, and we have various different sizes, right? So to start, we'll say, just to kind of kick it off from like this launch point here, we'll say, I want ice cream. So again, these buttons here, like WebEx doesn't have any knowledge of what any of this stuff is. There's some code in the middle that's kind of liaising, from WebEx that's liaising to Voiceflow, and then some of our other integrations. So that list of buttons, right here, those are those buttons here. So add another button, we can see another button. So let's be well behaved, and we'll say vanilla. What kind of ice cream are you looking for? So we'll say vanilla. Say what size. I'll say medium. And so put it in a nice little card for us. Boom. So we have successfully ordered ice cream. And we were pretty well behaved. We clicked the button and we said, what size? You don't need an NLU for that, right? You can when this whole thing started, I'm like, why don't you just use regexes? But it's like, well, you can do other stuff with it. So let's pretend you don't want to be nice. You can say, give me a large chocolate. Right? I think it's probably wise to be polite to these agents, but you so notice it'll right. So it does a natural language extraction, and we go from there, right? So to what we were discussing earlier, well, what if there's like other ways to express ice cream? The only thing our conversation people should really be thinking about is the logic in here, their content in here. But you could do some other stuff, like, for instance, give me a moment. If you wanted to do, for instance, you see that okay? I think that's working.
Yep, you're up.
Got it. So here I have some real strawberries. I'll take it.
So you put that in.
So what we're, yeah. So all I did, and a conversation designer wouldn't need to have any context on this or any understanding of like the behind the scenes of this. Oh, bummer. Let's try it again. I hate phony demos. So we're using real APIs here. Let's try to get this away.
Let's see.
Yeah, so we're using the Google Vision API behind the scenes. Let's see if it's hitting correctly.
Oh.
Well, you know what? At least we got caught doing a real demo. But yeah, I promise, of course, it worked earlier. Where you could take a photo of this. It would hit an API, and it resolves to the word strawberry, right? And
Towards the end of
so we already know what strawberry is as part of our entities. So a user could just snap a picture of something, right? Or maybe there's some other neat integration. You alluded to location earlier,
Mhm.
right? Kind of like a pattern, like in a web browser on a phone, hit location. And this WebEx client, out the gate doesn't have a like a built-in location feature. We can add that on, and what we can do inside of Voiceflow is our conversation designers can say, like, they don't need to worry about the details of how we deliver location data to them. We just have a simple like location service that'll give us kind of course, like not their exact location, but just kind of roughly where they are, their zip code. And they can call in and we get a little prefix depending on the temperature, right? And all we did is we're just calling an existing API, that's enriched with this new location data that the engineers can use. And you could imagine from here, right? We have a treat shop. Right now it only sells ice cream. If it's a chilly day, we don't want to sell ice cream. And, how do we know it's chilly? We can, not even the conversation engineers, but conversation design people, they can specify those rules here. They can decide whatever chilly day means in different locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then from here, they could have a whole thing that sells hot chocolate or something on like a cloudy day at the end. So kind of finding ways to like enrich these conversation designs with like new and interesting functionality, like, taking a picture of something or like adding location data. Yeah. Conversation designers then have those extra tools in their toolkit, and then they can write logic all inside of their authorship platform. So it's kind of like offering like, hey, maybe you can ask for user's location. If you don't have that, what's a good fallback for that? Oh, let's take a picture, and you don't need to worry about the details of it. It'll resolve to a value. And once you have that value, you can go for conversation designer, they can go off to the races, and do their thing from there.
And iterate on the foundation that you have provided. And I think, again, you talked about, you were afforded the early collaboration in the workflow, right? You knew what's possible with the designer, or you talked about what do we want to do, go back, find the APIs, be a builder, see what could happen, right? Yeah. Bring that back and I'll say, hey, look, I'm a problem solver. I made this for you. Now you iterate and bring it back to me. And now I can build on top of that foundation. So the work is stacking versus siloing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you get, I was trying to figure out like what's like the best metaphor for these teams. It's like kind of like a band. Everyone plays different instruments, or maybe it's like a sports team, whatever it is. It's like you have a group of people coming together, and each person has like massively unique and everyone has disparate, unique, different expertise. And being able to get everyone playing off the same sheet of music, we'll stick with that band metaphor, like you can create really, really neat things, but you have to have conversation. Like this is very much a people-driven, even though we're doing automation, this is so much a people-driven and like team process, and figuring out ways to kind of help. I think it all comes back to like finding ways to help your conversation designers and content experts, like, unleash these creative professionals to make really excellent, cool experiences for customers. Amazing. I find that immensely satisfying, and using tooling like Voiceflow is, I think, a key part of that arsenal for sure.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic, and June dropped in the comments that she's seen the working demo as well, and I have as well. So honestly, no, I mean the work you did to put that demo together, really, it's a made up store, but I think the use case, right? Whether it's Cisco, whether it's healthcare, whether it's insurance or whatever industry, I think there is a use case for dynamically serving up and providing customer context, right? Whether that's through location, whether that's through how they want to communicate photo, right? Like that opens up a new level of ability and opportunity in the experiences that your team can create.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I want to open it up to questions now that we've kind of hit the 15-minute mark here. If anyone does have questions in the chat, I did bring one or two that I got on LinkedIn prior to the event. If anyone does have questions for Victor, feel free to drop them in the chat. He can answer them live, or you can always email them to me and I'll pass them along to Victor. But the one question that I brought up, and actually it came from one of our earlier conversations, you had talked about kind of the bounds of the chatbot, right? Or like where it lives, right? I think we touched on this a little bit with customer context today, but I think it would be very valuable for anyone here to kind of hear your thoughts on maybe where do you see things, where do you see the with the pixel bounds, right, of the chatbot and how that starts to interact with content beyond just the chat experience.
Yeah, like, there's so many, when you say chat, like that can mean like, oh, like a smart device, a voice experience. I'm speaking very deliberately here about, like, I don't even know if this is a word, like web chat, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's say you're inside a web application that already exists and you want ways to enhance it. Having a conversation tool that's not just a widget tacked on that has no sense of what's going on in like the broader interface doesn't, like you'll have probably mediocre experiences, but if you have like a deep integration with the kind of host UI in which that chat agent serves, I've been thinking a lot about like I've taken to calling it like off-roading, where you're doing something in the chat, and then because it's integrated with the environment in which it lives, it can trigger something in the UI. Like, for instance, like, if it's like, hi, I'm a new user. Ooh, do you want to take our tour? You could say from the chat agent, say yes, and then trigger like a welcome tour in the UI. I've seen anecdotally, it's funny, things that look like chat widgets that are not in fact chat widgets that are all about accessibility. Because accessibility is like, it's like a major legal requirement, and like it has to be done, especially for a large organization. There are some, I've seen widgets where you can pop them out, you can click something, it can make the text on the shell interface super high contrast. You can, do the fonts, do screen reading and stuff like that. So from a chat widget, you all of a sudden can like, kind of instrument the host UI, right? Yep. And like either make it more accessible or like have it, do something. Once you start thinking that way, like, ooh, there's a lot of really unique and interesting opportunities there.
Absolutely. I thought that was
like automate traversing. Yeah.
I thought, yeah, and obviously down the road, and not a tomorrow thing, but just showing again that you're thinking what's next with content, with design. The other question I did have from another developer actually was just like a few maybe very specific, even if it's one like tactical things that you did in becoming a champion on the dev side for designers. Yeah, you could recommend like, hey, someone raised their hand. Our collaboration between dev and design is horrible right now. Like, let's say they're listening to this. What would you say like tomorrow, step one is to like bridge that gap and start to have some of the innovative collaborative sessions that you have at Cisco?
No, absolutely. I think something that I think definitely helped our process was like having shared spaces. So whatever, hopefully using WebEx or like whatever collaboration tooling you're using, it's like have shared spaces where deliberately like, almost like like when people are in like an office, there are those little miscellaneous bombardments. Having people just talk to each other more. What is this engineering team? What are you guys in fact working on? Or conversation folks, what's like, what are you thinking of supporting multiple languages? Like, I think just getting the ball rolling and just like making people like situationally aware of what other groups are up to, I think would be like a step zero. But I think more deliberately would be like the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is the content, right? For any of these chat agents, whether or not this thing works, or when I say works, like in fact solves a user's problem, is going to be by the content, whether that content's written by a person or generated by some backend system, or like I do a lot of work extracurricularly with like GPT-3 and like personas and stuff, whether, who knows where that text comes from ultimately, but it needs to be great. Odds are you're probably not generating like, full like conversations where like some AI is driving the train full on, driving the car like the whole way. So if you can find some way where these, these like little collaboration opportunities can happen with each other, that's usually a big win as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I know Zoran touched on that 2 weeks ago, talking about really having those meetings that you discussed, not only in the passive, message, but also in that like design dev team time at business problem, with PMs ahead of time. Like, I think it's so simple, yet will in fact revolutionize the way that you're actually outputting as a CAI team.
Yeah, very much so. And this is almost like a little hack for that stuff too. get to know other conversation designers as well. I was, I was a little duckling in the conversation design world. I was so struck by kind of this broader community. I got to, I hit up Becca Avenho and like we talked on Zoom a couple of times. I was like, how should you do handoff? Is it like a Figma file? Like what, how do you make these things? And in my experience, I found people are very open and very candid about like stuff that works. And, like there's many different ways to do this. And it's definitely, as from an engineering perspective, it's definitely worth your while to peek around more, get out of just thinking about engineering. Like it's funny, like the actual engineering work for like, when we've made like a, version 0 of this is just like an experiment. It was kind of a bummer because like most of the time you're doing kind of grunt work about like web hooks, or you're like, I have to go build a UI, think about like the JSON, like stuff that's not like, super high value or exciting. But every time I peek over to what folks are doing on with the content writing side and like how they're thinking about strategy, like that's really cool stuff. So especially for anyone who's like on the engineering side of it, get really curious about what these, what these content and conversation people are doing all day. And go talk to lots of different one of them. And like there's so many interviews and podcasts and stuff now. Like this is a very like, very friendly, like vibrant, fresh community that's very much worth your time.
Amazing. That's a wonderful note to end on. Good tactical piece of advice for anyone who's listening, I think. And can echo that from the design to learn about the dev side as well, I'm sure, right? Vice versa. Well, we're about time here. Thank you so much, Victor. That was great. I hope everyone that's was here live or is watching after the fact got some value out of this. And it was a pleasure to have you join today.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.